Afternoon, Texans, and thank you for joining us today during Free Speech Week. My name is Ashley Ford, and I'll be today's moderator today, discussing how free speech is used in recent events with potential presidents, protests, and sensitive talk in the classroom. But first, let's meet our student guests.
I'm Renee Warner. I am a senior and a journalism broadcasting major, and I'm from Austin, Texas.
My name is Luis Gonzalez. I am a senior. I'm a political science major, and my hometown is Austin, Texas.
Hi, I'm Megan. I am from Dallas. I am a junior here and a political science major as well.
Great. And I would like to say thank you not only to our panel of students, but as well to our professors who are here today with us, Dr. Marcy Tanter and Dr. Maddie Fitch.
Hi, I'm Marcy Tanter. I'm professor of English here at Tarleton State University, and I got my PhD at the University of Massachusetts Amherst.
I'm Maddie Fitch. I teach modern European history in the social sciences department, and I got my PhD from Yale University.
And once again, I would like to say thank you for everyone's participation today as we discuss 3 questions and topics that are related to those questions about free speech. For each question, each student will have 2 minutes to answer, and then the topic will be brought up for open discussion, and then our professors will chime in then. So for our first question, for our students, where do you draw the line between speech and hate speech? Should hate speech be censored or opposed with more free speech?
Well, I'm not exactly sure where we should draw the line between free speech and hate speech because, you know, you can't help when someone else feels offended by something that you say, and you might not ever know what you're saying will affect the way people will think about you or the way that they speak to other people, and they might have different views from you, and so we can't expect people to adopt the way that we think just because that's the way that we are raised, and that's the way that we have been taught or have researched on our own, but the only thing that I think we can do is try to educate people, and I think that's where we should draw the line, because I might say something about Black Lives Matter and someone will automatically assume that I'm speaking hate or preaching separatism, but that is not what I'm trying to preach. But I think it would help if people would actually ask questions and do their own research and not be so biased.
To me, in my perspective, where we draw the line is intent. What was the intent of your comment or your statement? To me, I can say, okay, I am pro-Black, or I understand certain perspectives of different communities, but it's kind of when you say, oh, you went to Subway, or oh, you went to Subway. It's all in the tone and your surroundings. An individual must be self-aware in what environment they are in. Certain comments are appropriate for certain environments, other comments are not. So as an individual, you must understand your surroundings, the individuals you are. You also have to be understanding that not everybody is educated and might say an ignorant comment. By ignorant, I mean an uneducated statement. So we as individuals must understand different perspective and be socially aware of what's appropriate for a certain environment or a different environment. Kind of like me talking to my best friend is not the same way I'm gonna approach Dr. DeTavio. That's where I stand.
For me, I think free speech is going to go back to the Constitution, looking at it from a constitutional standpoint. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no law infringing on free speech. So it's a right that we have. It's not a right that is given to us. That's our personal right. So I do believe that what the Supreme Court says, that even if you are burning an American flag, that's still free speech. That's still how you feel. Unfortunately, not a lot of Americans like that, but that is still free speech. I think where you draw the line when it comes to free speech and hate speech is if you are in clear and present danger of what that person is saying. So if you feel threatened by what that person is saying, whether it's opposition to a Black Lives Matter protest and the Black Lives Matter protesters feel threatened by that, I can see that as hate speech. And so if you feel like you're in clear and present danger, then yes, I would feel that that's hate speech. Also, President Obama stood up and talked at the 2009 at the United Nations, and he said the only way to combat hate speech is with more free speech, a right that we are guaranteed, that is one of our natural rights, as Thomas Jefferson talked about in the Declaration of Independence. So that's where I stand on that.
Wonderful. Thank you, students. Now, with that in mind, let's discuss how people express their own opinions about maybe the LGBTQ community, BLM, or even Trump's comments about women.
Well, first of all, Trump's comments are extremely ignorant because he has to be aware that people are voting for him, and young men and women are looking up to him, and there are people who want to vote for him and want him to be our president, but he's not making any clear sense, and he's trying to say that, you know, someone is out to get them and the campaign is rigged, but that should not be, you know, the result of what he said in his past. He should not try and come back in the present day and say, oh, I said that and that's boys talk. And as far as the LGBTQ community, I think that some people just need to keep some of their opinions to themselves or to discuss them amongst their inner circles instead of voicing their opinions and saying, oh, if you're gay, we don't like you, go away. And the same thing with Muslims, you're not welcome here in this country. And I think that that is just completely wrong for people to say, because if we are in America, we're supposed to be the land of the home and the free, and refugees come here to be able to express their love and be able to express their own religion and not feel like they're going to be judged.
Beginning with, I'm going to follow the same platform Renee established, is following Trump's comments. I feel that they are very inappropriate for a presidential candidate. An individual who is supposed to sway the nation in a particular way should not emphasize comments that degrade women. In my opinion, those comments contribute to rape culture, and they're very misogynist comments. Trump has no right to, I wouldn't say no right, he should not, as a figure of influence, state these comments and justify them as locker room talk. As an individual who has partaken in some sports, I've been part of many locker rooms, and not once have I heard a teammate be forceful about his comments. We might degrade women, but those two should not happen. But at the same time, we have not forced those topics. Essentially what Trump did to me was they took away the woman's option of choice. He forced himself on her. He grabbed such and such. So that's where I draw the line, where these are very inappropriate. For LGBT community, as an individual who's not part of that community, there's few comments that I can say, but in the sense I support the movements they have established. A lot of these topics are very taboo to our society still, and through progress and through conversation, we can adapt to these individuals and accept them as individuals that deserve the same right as we do. The same with Black Lives Matter movement. These are individuals that have been oppressed since the beginning of the United States, and these individuals just want to seek out fairness and equal treatment. You can bring in different topics such as systematic racism, mass incarceration, things like that contribute to the oppression of individuals. But that's a different conversation.
My opinion on free speech about these issues that are very apparent in our society right now, especially speaking on Black Lives Matter, is I said this to a group of people the other day. Last time I checked and looked in the mirror, I wasn't Black. So who am I to condemn a movement that I've never fell victim to? That's never affected me. How can I go stand in front of a Black Lives Matter protest and say you're wrong? I've never felt that oppression before. I've never been judged because of the color of my skin, maybe the color of my hair, but not necessarily the color of my skin. So when it comes to free speech, you may not like it, but that's the great thing about America is we can stand up and we have those options. Say you were to protest against something in Russia, if it was me, you probably wouldn't see me at school the next day. So when it comes to free speech, and especially Black Lives Matter, I know they didn't talk about that too much. I definitely think that that's something people should think about when they do go to criticize the Black Lives Matter movement, is have you fell victim to that before they start to speak about it.
All right, well, thank you, students, for all that feedback. Now let's hear from our professors.
So the problem that I see with this concept of opposing hate speech with more free speech is that hate speech often acts to shut down the speech of others. Hate speech makes people feel that they don't belong or that they don't have power. The point of hate speech is to discredit other people as individuals with rights. And so the people at whom hate speech is directed might not be able to speak in that environment. And so to me, it's the most important response to hate speech needs to come from people with some sort of authority or power who are not necessarily being targeted, because they have the ability, when others don't, to say, this is inappropriate, this is not acceptable. To make it clear that hate speech is not tolerated. And so to speak more specifically about the Black Lives Matter protest that occurred on our campus, I was very disappointed by the lack of a response from the administration when lots of racist comments were made on social media. I thought it was the responsibility of the administration to say, this is hate speech and this is not something that is tolerated.
And to follow up on that, in our classrooms, we have a sort of a captive audience, and sometimes topics will come up where, sometimes racist comments will be made by students, as an example. And it's our job as professors to educate our students and help them understand the difference between saying something that is hurtful deliberately and making an offhand comment that can be hurtful. I mean, for me, hate speech would be something like when Donald Trump called a woman a fat pig. He was intentionally trying to hurt her feelings. He was trying to make her feel small. He was trying to belittle her. And so that was very intentional. Somebody else making an offhand comment to a friend when they might be frustrated or irritated is not directed at the person. It's still not the right thing to say, and it's unkind, but it wouldn't necessarily be hate speech in the moment. But when you direct something to a person, whether they are LGBTQI or they are Black or they are Hispanic or they are Indian or Asian or anybody, if you're directing a hateful comment towards somebody specifically to hurt them and to harm them, that's a totally different matter that has to be dealt with.
And to speak from a historian's standpoint, the freedom of speech has been most important for and claimed for people by people who lack representation or rights in the given system. So I think freedom of speech is most important and has been most important historically for disadvantaged groups claiming and asserting their rights, right? The freedom of speech did not come about as a means for people in power to infringe upon the rights of other people.
Now to our second question. How do the perspectives of others come into play when expressing symbolic speech?
I think it can either be good or bad when it comes to expressing your symbolic speech, especially amongst your friends or even in public, because, I keep saying this to people that were involved in the Black Lives Matter protest, that just because people might walk by and say hateful things to you, you should not let that stop you from speaking your mind and standing up for something that you believe in. And expressing something that is truly important to you just because someone was not raised the right way or they're ignorant to the situation. And so I think it's important, like I said earlier, for us to educate each other and for us to educate ourselves and not be so judgmental of each other and be able to open our minds and talk about these issues and to be able to look at these issues from different perspectives.
To me, my philosophy is there's always two sides to a coin. There's always going to be a good and a bad. And it's our job as individuals to understand that there always will be opposition to our own perspectives, to our own opinions. And we as individuals must accept those opinions and those perspectives and allow other individuals to speak their mind. And I'm feeling that if someone were to say, okay, I feel this way about the presidential election and it's opposite of how I feel, I must understand that, hey, I need to know where you're coming from to understand you as an individual. And eventually, when we do that, we can have a healthy discussion of what the real issues are and how can we attribute to our society. So the symbols that I represent may not be the same as another individual, and that's okay. But it's my duty, or at least for myself, to be more educated on where you stand, what symbols you claim and how they impacted you so I can understand how you are as an individual?
For me, I definitely take into consideration everyone's point of view when I'm talking to someone. I feel like me and Luis have a little discussion almost every other day about a political issue, but I listen to his side and I understand that it doesn't between us. It doesn't make a rift between us. So when it comes to the perspective of others, no matter if we do consider that hate speech, unless you feel in danger, obviously, but to listen to someone's side and know where they're coming from is very important, because it may be their background, it may be the nature in which they were raised, how they were nurtured, those type of things. And so I think listening to someone else's side and hearing where they're coming from is one of the most important parts of expressing free speech.
Thank you. So every year here in Stephenville, Confederate flags are spread throughout the cemetery across from our campus. Some see the flag as a representation of history, even though others see it as an offensive symbol as well. How do other people's perspectives come into play when expressing symbolic speech that might be different to you than to others?
I hate seeing the Confederate flag spread across the cemetery and spread across campus every year. And I even had someone come into a gas station that I was working at, and he had the Confederate flag tattooed on his arm. And because I know the history of the flag and I know the history of the flag in Stephenville, it's really offensive to me. And I had to ask him, why do you have this flag? And the only thing he could tell me was that, his buddies put it on him, but he did not know anything else about it except for the fact that it's Southern pride. And then it's shocking to see the comments about the Black Lives Matter protest on Facebook, where people are saying, well, there's nothing wrong here in Stephenville, and why do you have to bring it here? Well, if they actually studied and if they knew the history behind the cemetery that's right across from our campus, maybe that would open their eyes. And I think many people should know about how they dug black bodies up from the cemetery and replaced them with Confederate soldiers. And I think it's truly important for people to know that history of where they are and the school that they're going to, because I had no idea about this story until a year ago.
To me, in my opinion, it goes back to the good versus bad. I might not agree with individuals putting a Confederate flag on a cemetery, but at the end of the day, that's their right and that's their belief. They are honoring another individual in a symbolic way. And to me, I might not know that individual, but I would take time out of my day to walk up to them and ask them, how do you feel about the Confederate flag? Have you considered this perspective? Do you understand the historical context behind it? And to me, there's multiple historical contexts to draw from the Confederate flag. You have your Southern pride, you have the oppression of African Americans, and whichever stance you take, an individual should accept that perspective, and that's how you unite. You might not agree with an individual, there will always be opposition, but at the end of the day, you as an individual must swallow your own pride, and I guess what's driving you from essentially disagreeing with this individual, and just accept that, hey, he's just doing it out of respect for, let's say, a grandfather or a great-grandfather who fought in the war. And that's, at the end of the day, that's their perspective, and I gotta respect that.
I agree with Louise on that, definitely. Looking at someone else's perspective, especially when it comes to the Confederate flag. Me personally, I see the Confederate flag. It was used all the way up until the 1950s for pro-slavery Democratic parties. So for me, when I see my friends like Renee, I think, wow, that's got to be offensive to her. And I don't want that, because I have friends that it offends and it might scare them in certain ways. Just like she's talking about the history of the graveyard across the street, I think that that's a very important point that you make, that the students here at Tarleton, along with the people who support those Confederate flags being put up, they learn the history about it, because it's very important too as well. But we also have to respect that, because some do see that as a Southern pride. Some people don't see that as pro-slavery, because they did have a grandfather, a father, or great-grandfather who fought in the Civil War. And so I definitely think that we should respect if they choose to do that, but instead of belittling them, maybe we should educate them. Maybe we should go out and say, hey, don't you realize that this is what happened? Do you approve of this? I mean, if not, should you really be waving the flag? So I think it goes back to education, not necessarily belittling someone who doesn't agree with you on that issue.
I think another thing is stepping out of our comfort zones, and like we're talking about grandfathers who have served in the Confederate Army. We have to be able to step out of our comfort zones and realize that just because our grandparents supported it and our ancestors supported it does not mean that we have to. And it's important for us to forget about generations and generations and generations being passed down, because if we continue to live out our ancestors' lives, then what is our future going to look like?
All right, thank you, students. Now let's hear what our professors have to say.
This is actually an issue that's very important to me because I know quite a bit about this. The Daughters and Sons of the Confederacy, two separate groups, are the ones who place the flags in the cemetery. And they don't only place them in the West Cemetery here across from campus, they place them in all the cemeteries in Erath County, with the exception of Mount Olive Cemetery, which Renee referred to. That's the cemetery where black citizens' graves were dug up from the West Cemetery and reburied at the Mount Olive Cemetery in 1922. The organizations that plant the flags have never asked anyone how they feel about them. They are legally allowed to go and place the flags on public property without permission. Anybody can do the same thing with any other flag if they wanted to. Like if we wanted to go and look up all the Union soldiers who are buried in the cemeteries, we could put Union flags, or something like that. They don't ask permission. They just go ahead and do this because they feel they are honoring their ancestors. I have had discussion with some people who approve of this, and they refuse to basically admit that their ancestors were supporting slavery. They try to turn it into something else, that they aren't pro-slavery, that these are people who were defending their homes and their farms and whatever. So you can have discussion with people about it, but sometimes they're going to see it the way that they see it. Where the harm does come in is that there are people here in Stephenville who have either lived here all their lives or who are students here at Tarleton or faculty at Tarleton or staff who do feel very offended because they understand that the purpose of the war was slavery. And seeing that flag does indicate to them that this is some kind of a support for slavery and for the slave system. And we have lost students, potential students to Tarleton who have come here in April, which is when the flags are placed, who have seen the flags in the cemetery and have been overheard saying to other people, I'm not going to come to school here because I'm going to have to face this. So, it's not just an issue of, placing flags in honor of somebody else, but it's something that they should consider, that it's a very sensitive issue, and there are people who are very hurt by it when they see it. And it's not just seen as a symbol of respect, but it also is a symbol of deep pain and upset. And that's not going to go away as long as those flags continue to be made public where people see them very easily.
As Renee explained earlier, with every act of speech, once it's been uttered, you can't control how somebody else perceives it because you can't control what experiences that person's had. So that means that it's incumbent upon us to consider the impact of our speech acts on other people. And so I think it's crucial to consider with this particular symbol, right? Is this symbol so important that it's worth sending a message to other people that you are somehow inferior or you are unwelcome in your own community, right? Is this symbol so important that it is worth that? And maybe to consider, is there some other symbol that could also express your history and could also honor your ancestors that wouldn't cause this sort of pain and sort of denigration to other people?
Some years ago, there was a resident in Stephenville who lived here in town in a neighborhood who, for Halloween, would put out a scarecrow. And the scarecrow would be dressed in overalls and a plaid shirt and would be sort of reclining on the ground, propped up against a pumpkin. And across from that figure, seated in a chair, would be another scarecrow dressed as a KKK member. And this would be displayed for at least 2 or 3 weeks in October during Halloween. And so children who were trick-or-treating in this neighborhood who would come by this person's house would see that symbol, and their parents would bring them to the door or not bring them to the door, depending on how they felt about this. But that also is a symbol of something that would say you're not welcome here. I mean, obviously, people who were targeted by the KKK are not going to be welcome to trick or treat at this person's house. So, you know, people, you know, do it intentionally or unintentionally, but they have to think about the consequences of what they say or do and how these symbols do matter to people and they do hurt.
All right, thank you for your feedback. Now for our last question of the broadcast, and that students at Tarleton would be able to relate to and across Texas. Do you think campus carry affects free speech in classrooms or on campus?
I think having guns on campus is really scary, especially, you know, we're at a very crucial time in this country. You know, we are in the modern day civil rights movement, and we have a lot of discussions going on about racism and the Black Lives Matter protests. And that was one of my concerns, that someone might not like the things that we say, or they might not like the things that we wrote on our signs, and might want to take it into their own hands and, you know, handle the situations with. It's really not that deep for you to go off and set off a gun and to threaten someone with a gun, and that goes the same token for bringing a gun into the classroom or bringing the gun into a student's office, not a student's office, a professor's office, and saying, hey, you know, I didn't like that C you gave me. And so I think that's really, that's a big threat to students and everyone on this campus. And the fact that we had a gun go off accidentally is also scary, because that could have hit someone potentially. And like I said, with all these racism, these racist remarks going on social media, it's just really a crucial time for people to allow themselves to think about what they do, or actually have a license to have this gun. And I know that there are people on this campus that do not have a license, but I want people to be smart about it and yes, protect yourself. I would love to protect myself. I don't have my license, but I think it's something that we're all going to have to get together and work on. There wasn't a lot of conversations going on about it. We did have information coming out, but a lot of people just assume that just because we can have guns on this campus that, you know, it's not a free-for-all, and then it is a free-for-all. I'm not sure if I'm making sense here.
You are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, I feel that guns should not be allowed on a campus. I feel that these weapons create a false sense of security, and that's from the individuals that I spoke to, that's the main argument. I want to make sure I protect my own right, I protect my own safety. But when individuals are put in a fight-or-flight situation, you don't know, your behavior becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability is dangerous, especially when a weapon is involved. You can either save the day or cause more harm. Statistically proven, you can cause more harm than benefits. I do like weapons in a sense that I am pro-gun, but essentially in a place of education where ideas flow freely and individuals are succumb to opposition frequently, an individual might be aggressive when receiving that opposition and might want to take actions into their own hands, like Renee expressed. And when that happens, that's where I draw the line of saying, okay, is carrying weapons on campus, even though it's concealed, beneficial to the student population as a whole? To me, there hasn't been any type of scenes that an active shooter has been involved. And according to the cards that we were provided by the Tarleton University, which decides what steps should need to be taken if there's an active shooter, to me those are ridiculous steps. So I'm very iffy about the subject, but at the end of the day, I believe that guns should not be allowed on campus.
I definitely agree with Renee and Louise on the fact that I'm not a fan of campus carry. I think concealed carry is a great role, it's a great law. It allows people to exercise their Second Amendment if need be. Lots of concealed carriers in my family. I believe that's a right that we have, one of our natural rights. But when it does come to a place of education where ideas do flow freely, that's scary to me, because I sit in law classes, legal studies classes, and these debates get heated, and it's like, okay, great. And some of my professors are very vocal, so it's like, man, I'm kind of hoping none of these students here who are very closed-minded about things maybe can concealed carrying on campus. So that can definitely be scary for a lot of us. I don't have the answer. I don't know what we should do if there's an active shooter on campus. It scares me. It's something that I wish this world didn't have to deal with. Breaks my heart. But I think that if we can come together and find a better way than campus carry, I would love to do that. Also, a lot of the students here are between the ages of 17, 18, 19, 21. And of course, you can't have that till you are 21. But if someone was to think that they can just do it without a license, your brain's not really fully developed till 25, I think is what they say. So for them not to have that, be able to process, is this actually something that I should do? Is this okay? It's something that scares me too. So I definitely agree with Louise and Renee on that. And hopefully we can come together, find something better than the campus carry.
Adding to that, the steps that were provided by Tarleton was run, hide, or confront the shooter. So, and that's honestly the third step is confront, where you feel you're in immediate danger. But I feel there's an active shooter, you're always going to be in immediate danger. And how frequently can you run away from an active shooter without possibly that individual firing at you? Hiding could only work to a certain extent. And then getting aggressive with the individual might escalate the situation where you might harm yourself and others. And that goes to my belief of, if an individual had a concealed carry, we did have an active shooter, that individual decides to take out that weapon and try to defend the population. One, there's already unpredictability by the active shooter. Two, by pulling out a weapon, you add more unpredictability, putting others in harm. And I feel that for me, logically, that is not the best route to take in the approach. So we have wonderful police officers here on campus. The procedures, they are trained very well, and I trust them with my life. When I came to Tarleton on college visit, I felt safe. And that was one of the concerns of my mother was, hey, is your safety going to be is a priority for me? And I said, all right, Mom, I'm an adult now, so I can handle this. But when you add weapons and unpredictability behavior, I don't know that individual, so I don't know how well you are with the weapon. I don't know how much training you've had. So to me, that's wrong. But
Going off of what Megan said about the heated conversations in classrooms, I saw today that there was a conversation, well, not a lecture, in a classroom at Texas State where a professor, he revealed the truth that everyone on this earth comes from Africa. Everyone is of African descent. And a group of students actually got up and walked out, which is fine, but I could only imagine if someone had a gun on them and they did not like that truth. And that's just something that we really have to think about when we are talking about these issues, because like we said earlier, you can't help when people are offended by the things that you say, but it's the way that they react, that is what's important, that we need to be educated in how to respond to these certain situations or conversations and be able to open our minds and open our ears and not act before we think.
All right, let's hear on this topic from the perspective of our professors.
Okay. This is a very complicated issue. This was forced on us without discussion, and I'm very disappointed by how prevalent guns can be on our campus now. I don't feel that what's happening in my classes is being affected at this point by the potential of someone having a gun. What I am concerned about is safety. Where there's really very little protection for us. If we were to have a shooter in a campus or in this room or anywhere else here, a classroom or the dining hall or even in a residence hall, there's no protection. We don't have panic buttons in classrooms. Most of the classrooms only have one door, one exit. A lot of classrooms have no windows, so it's almost like we're sitting ducks. And that may stifle discussion along the way. I have yet to alter anything that I'm doing, but down the line, if we start to see that a lot of students do have guns, and we find this out through conversations or something, because you can't ask people, but we may find out. It is possible that at some point I could alter something that I want to teach or want to have my students read or discuss. I don't feel that way at the moment, but it could come down the line.
I also haven't removed anything from my syllabus because I was afraid it was a sensitive issue, but I think it is a very real concern. Right? The point of an education, as Luis was saying earlier, is to engage with new ideas and to think about what ideas you hold and why you hold them, and to debate with other people about these ideas. And this can only work in a civil and respectful environment. This can only work in an environment with free speech. And so if there's any sort of threat of violence that might remove that freedom of speech, then it gravely harms the academic environment. And so I think it's possible people can exercise their Second Amendment rights without introducing this threat of violence that can infringe on people's First Amendment rights. People can own guns and use them in appropriate situations. That doesn't mean that they need to bring them into a classroom and infringe upon other people's rights.
Right. And, with the Black Lives Matter demonstration that we had, I was so proud of the students who organized, and Renee was the main organizer, and I was very proud of her for doing it. And I was proud of the students and the faculty and the staff who came and who were there and who took part in it. And I hope we see more things like that, because it was very civil, it was very safe, it was peaceful. But there could be a time when we have a situation where that kind of demonstration could turn ugly. And with people having permission to have guns, we may have more people who have them, and then something could happen in the future which then would shut down probably all future demonstrations like that, which again infringes on free speech in a roundabout way, but it still would make people feel stifled. And the point of a university is to have open discussion, and you may not like everything being discussed, but that's how we learn, is through discussion.
All right, well, what such great feedback from our professors and students here at Tarleton. I want to thank everyone for their input on the current events and participating in our free speech broadcast. I hope today's discussion has brought up some topics that you've never thought of, some new perspectives, has inspired you to speak more freely and open up your minds. Once again, thank you everyone for participating in Free Speech Week.